Hello and welcome to another episode of My Life in Objects. So today I'm going to be talking about this book, well I suppose this and this, because they're connected, not just through the author and it being about the author. So as I was thinking about future episodes for the series, an idea bounced into my head, or a thought bounced into my head, and it was that I was trying to think, what's the oldest book that I bought from you that I still currently have in my possession? And a lot of reasons why I don't have books older than this that were bought from you is other books of this era have long since fallen apart. But also, well, I think actually most of that's the case. I'm trying to think anything like why I don't have any books that have survived from childhood. I suppose a lot of my reading books were passed down, and this one I didn't acquire until, this is published in 79, so yeah, actually would be around this period, and I'll explain why I believe that's correct. It was very close to 79 from when this book came out. So anything before this publication date that I had has probably fallen apart or been passed on, or maybe just got mislaid. And this is the oldest book I could find. I have older books, but they were bought as old from second-hand bookstores for a specific reason, for a specific subject area that I was interested in. But yeah, this is the oldest in terms of bought as new. So why do I actually have a copy of the Silmarillion in the first place? Well, this was bought as part of a series of books. So in my before my teens actually, I was sent to elocution lessons, and as part of that process every year we had an examination, like these grades. You could do these grades. So as one of the grades, I can't remember which one it was, the chosen piece of prose, because you normally had a piece of poetry, a piece of prose, and the piece of prose was normally an extract from a book, and the extract was from The Hobbit. And as a consequence as well, not only having to be able to read by sight the piece, because I think at that point, I can't remember whether you had to remember. I don't think you did. I think with the prose you could have the book in your hand, but invariably you'd learnt it anyway, because it is a real skill to sight read without knowing a piece. It does take a lot of skill. I've been in a position where I've had to do that, and one thing that's rather sad over the years is my ability to do that has quite dramatically diminished compared to what it used to be like, and no end of practice seems to get that back. So I've just got to live with it. It's a result of burnout and age, unfortunately. But yeah, so as part of the process of learning the piece, you're expected to read the book as well, because you'll be asked questions about the author in the examination. And I devoured The Hobbit. It's the first time I've been in a situation where I just really enjoyed the book I was having to read. Up to that point, it had mainly been a lot of Julius Caesar, a lot of Shakespeare, particularly, and other writers that I wasn't particularly interested in. But this is the first writer I felt fully engaged with. So after devouring The Hobbit, I went out and bought the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and ultimately this, within the space of about, well, a few months actually. Now what was interesting is doing that also had a knock-on effect. So at that point I was probably, I don't know, between the ages of about 14 and 16, and between those ages in the UK you're normally involved in doing, well, back then it would have been O-levels and also CSEs, and I wasn't doing particularly well in English, particularly writing book reports. In fact, my first book report that I did, which was on the book On the Beach, whose author name escapes me. It's about a post-apocalyptic Australia, set in the post-apocalyptic Australia actually. I got, I think, a D on it. But for my next book report I got an A, and that was because at that point I'd read Lord of the Rings and I did my book report on Lord of the Rings. And that just transformed my book reports going forward. One is the selection of books, so I picked a lot of other authors that were in a similar vein. Susan Cooper was one, and there was a whole slew of other ones I then did book reports on. And that transformed my English grades as a consequence. And the last book I bought from that era was this. My copy of The Hobbit was borrowed anyway, and I didn't know, I've got other copies in the house, but they're a lot newer. My copies of my Lord of the Rings trilogy, which was the same, you know, what do they call it, imprint as this, same style, same publishing period, just fell apart. I think one of them has even got orange juice in it. You can see this is looking particularly old. Oh look, there's one of the... I was always fascinated by these. I spent one summer at my grandparents' mapping all of these out from the books on pieces of brown paper that I'd stuck together. I was that into it. And I bought a book also published by, what was this on at the time? Unwin, which was an encyclopedia about, you know, the Tolkien world. Again in paperback, slightly larger. That's long fallen apart. And so yeah, all the stuff I now have is a lot newer, but this is the only one that survives from that era. It's probably part of it is because it's the less read. I've probably only read this a couple of times. Now, the reason why this is here, this was bought not long after. When I was reading The Hobbit, my elocution teacher, Miss Bird, suggested that I should read his biography, and she lent me her copy. This is the copy that I bought after the fact. You can see again, it's got that same mottling. What would they call it in the watch world? It was called patina. I don't know if the same applies to books. So this was also, this was 78, yeah. But it wasn't, it was bought not long after this. Funny, like £1.95. I don't know what the price on this is. Oh, £1.25. Now the other story that connects these two books, and in fact the other books that had long since fallen apart, is these were bought from a little local independent bookstore, which was in the centre of the village where I lived. So I would walk down at the weekend. It's about, I don't know, half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour walk from where I lived on the outskirts of the village, and spend some time in there, and invariably buying Tolkien books. And I remember on one occasion, one of the books I bought, it wasn't this one clearly, maybe it was the encyclopedia, maybe it could have even been a copy. When was this, the original copy printed? 77, no. But what it was is the book was so old, it was pre-decimalisation, which I think is sometime 70, I think, yeah, decimalisation in the UK was 71. when we went from what was called old money to new money. And it was marked up, these recommended retail prices they were called back then. It was marked up in old money. So the bookseller, who was this really old, wizened guy, he had to sit down and actually work out. This would have been, I suppose, well, I don't know if he had a calculator, probably pre-calculator days, but like work out what the equivalent was in decimal money, which was quite amusing at the time. The book was so old, but I insisted on. I really wanted the book that it was, and like I said, I'm not sure which it was. I know it was a Tolkien-related book. But anyway, yeah. So this is the oldest book bought as new that I still have in my book collection. And at some point, I probably want to reread this again. I actually found this pretty hard going for some reason. Not sure why. And at some point in the future, in a future video, I will dig out some other Tolkien artifacts that I've picked up over the years. Obviously a lot newer than this. I picked up quite an interesting one when I was over in the UK in 2019, so pre-COVID. I got from one of the bookstores attached to a library in Oxford, and I think it's called Tolkien Treasures. It's a lovely book, so I'll at some video in the future I'll get that on camera as well. But anyway, these are my objects for this video. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next episode.